Today I'd love to share with you a very dangerous and aggressive way of countering the Scandinavian defense popular among beginners. Now you first trade on d5 and then you play knight c3 attacking the queen. Now the most classical variation is queen a5 and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Of course some of your opponents may passively retreat the queen back to d8, but then it's pretty clear that black hasn't achieved much during the first moves. And now, of course your opponents do expect you to play one of the usual developing moves, but instead you sacrifice a pawn with pawn b4, known as the Leonhardt Gambit. Now it's a very dangerous opening. It's played by Nakamura and he's got some impressive victories over our other top level GMs, but of course you can play just as well. The idea is that we keep gaining tempos attacking this queen, and although we sacrifice one pawn, that allows us to include one more piece into play while black still keeps being that dancing queen that is just losing time. Now, right now, black has to move the queen away, and interestingly enough, although there are many options, only one of them is correct, while many other are already kinda dubious. So first off, let me show you a game of Lasker, the second world champ, and he was playing white in a simul. His opponent played queen d4, which is not the right choice, and let's see how quickly black can go down after that. White plays now knight f3, gaining one more tempo for his development. Finally, black decided to bring the queen back to safety, but now white plays bishop a3, another great move. White actually puts pressure down this diagonal, making it harder for black to push the pawn, because if black does that, well, trade bishops and black will have to move their king, thus losing the right of castle. For that reason, black decided to fianchetto the bishop and to develop it that way. But now white just plays bishop c4. It's, by the way, quite remarkable how great white's development advantage is by now. Anyway, black played bishop g7, knight e4. White is horsing around. He wants to probably attack this pawn one way or the other with one of his knights. Black decided to play c6 and now queen e2. Another interesting move. It turns out that there's a threat of knight to d6 check. For instance, if black were to play knight f6, that would be wrong because of knight d6. Quite an impressive attacking idea. We check the king, but there's nothing black can do. He can't capture it with a pawn because it's pinned down to the king. And he can't capture the knight with a queen because we've got our bishop there, that would lose a queen for black. Therefore, in this case, black would be just losing the game right away because from here our knight attacks way too much. For example, we can trade and then play queen takes c7 check, and then we can deliver this fancy bishop checkmate. Of course, you could do this with a queen, but it's always funnier to do it with a bishop. In the actual game, black saw this threat coming and he just moved his king away, thinking that now his position is secure. However, white sacrificed the bishop right here. We want to break open the position because we have so huge advantage in activity that we just want to go straight into the attack. Black took it, and now white played another impressive move. Rook takes b7, this time sacrificing the rook. It turned out that white simply wants to deflect the bishop from this diagonal, covering these weaknesses. And after that, there is knight to g5 check. And what can black do? The king can't go here because of knight e6 fork. Here white would win. If instead king goes to e8, that falls right into the previous threat, knight to d6 check that we've seen before, and black is lost in all the variations. The funniest would be king to f8, leading to this nightmare. It is common for black to move the queen back to a5. However, it allows white some very spectacular and unusual attack. We go rook b5, and we keep chasing the queen. The only available square for the queen, because we took away this square, took away this one, as well as this one, would be queen to a6. But this is quite an uncomfortable square because of our bishop from f1 x-raying the queen. And although we can take advantage of this right now, that still feels very annoying. And you can just develop your knight, knight f3, and now black still has to do something about this threat. Now, the one funny variation is if they try playing c6, getting rid of this annoying rook, you can really humiliate black by just doing nothing and playing pawn to d4, just continuing your development. And the fun thing is, black is kind of cornered, they're still completely passive, you just give up the rook seemingly, and in most cases they actually capture it, but after bishop takes b5, it turns out that this queen that's been dancing around is finally lost, and white wins the game. Now let's go back to the main line. Instead of pawn to c6, a lot of players would play queen e6 because it feels like a good escape from this dangerous square as well as gaining a tempo. But you don't let them break free. You play knight e5. You don't just cover up your king, you instead prepare your future attack. And at first looks like it's a dangerous move, because of this pin, black can do something. Feels like they can play f6 or c6 and try to target your rook and knight. But none of that works, because if they do any of that, you go bishop c4 and you counterattack. Plus you also attack the pawn and thus the king, which also forces the queen to move, which means that there will be no pin any longer. And after the queen moves, white could take this pawn right away, which would be nice, but he decided to just horse around and keep harassing the queen. The queen moved here, white played d3, attacking the queen once more. The queen jumps here, now bishop takes f7. Finally, white was generous enough to capture the pawn, and after king d8, the rook was still hanging, but white wins in multiple different ways. For example, bishop g5, and this queen is finally lost, plus the king is exposed and black is completely devastated. Now the correct retreat for black would be queen to d6, where it's not that easy for you to keep chasing the queen. Then you just complete your development, you play knight to f3. Now another beauty of this whole variation is that black can't ever really play this bishop g4 pinning your knight, because if they ever try this in this position or during any of the following moves, that actually is a blunder. If they move the bishop away, that leaves this b7 pawn undefended, and because you've got this rook on b1, you've got this powerful move rook takes b7. And not only you grab the pawn, this rook is actually very active. For instance, if they play knight to c6, just developing a knight, you then play knight b5. And all of a sudden the rook and the knight are teaming up together, and black is already defenseless. We're threatening the queen, but if the queen moves, we also threaten knight takes c7, which would fork the king and the rook, and white is just winning the game. Now let's take it back. Sometimes black tries to get rid of this annoying rook by playing queen to c6, but that also fails to bishop b5, pinning the queen and still winning the game. Black could play something else, but either way, you have this very, very strong attack and probably a winning position already. This shows that they can't move their bishop to g4 or anywhere, and they have to be more modest and just accurately finalize their development. And if they do so and play, let's say, knight f6, you do the same thing. You just play d4 to open up your bishop, you just complete your development. Quite often they play c6, just because otherwise, quite often, they have trouble with all kinds of threats via this b5 square, so they want to cover up. After that, you play bishop c4, then they go e6, this time they want to block your bishop, then you just castle, and although you don't win the game on the spot, but still, black's position is very cramped and unpleasant. And here, you can throw this knight out there to e5, and you have a bunch of attacking opportunities after that. Yes, you didn't win the game right into the opening, but you have this long-lasting pressure. You can play bishop f4 and x-ray the queen. You can play bishop g5 and just overall put pressure. Sometimes white even uses the rook lift, like the rook can come over here and attack, or sometimes even the other rook can be transferred this way and also join the party. You have a bunch of attacking options. Also, there is an interesting tactical pattern here that arises from various lines of this Leonhardt Gambit. If black ever goes knight d7, trying to maybe trade off this knight, of course you don't have the reason to do anything about that, this also blocks the bishop. It no longer guards the e6 square. And notice that we have a bunch of pieces aiming towards these two squares f7 and e6, which creates great conditions for our sacrifice and for breaking open the position with knight takes f7, and again, not only in this position, in other situations as well. Now, it feels dangerous to bring the king out, so they'll usually take it with the rook. Now, rook takes e6, hits the queen, and the only square for the queen to go to would be queen to c7. I mean, they can play all the way back to b8, but that doesn't change anything. But now you win with rook takes e7, and you capitalize on the pin. Therefore, on the next move, you're going to win the rook for nothing and win the game. Although queen a5 is considered the main move, on amateur level, actually the most popular move is queen to d8. And I've got another video where I'm showing with you a very simple and aggressive way to counter that as well. You can check it out right here. And if you want to understand any openings and understand simple rules to play any opening well, check out the free masterclass by clicking the link up there.